The neighborhood froze as she stood in the middle of the street, holding her clipboard aloft like a holy decree, screaming at the three cops that I was trespassing on public property. Without even asking or listening, she had taken it upon herself as if she were the law. Her face was red with rage, her voice echoing through the neighborhood with blunt accusations. She believed that her self-proclaimed authority would make me submit, that her threats, her frivolous tickets, and her orchestrated community meetings would scare me away. But when she called 911 to deliver the final blow, she had ripped off her mask of authority, and I had waited for this moment. The moment she pressed the button to call the police, she had brought her arrogance to the table, and I would rip off that mask right in front of everyone. I live a quiet life in the Maplewood Gardens complex, working from home as a software engineer. My name is David Thompson, and I am 32 years old. Karen Mitchell, 36, has been the self-proclaimed president of our HOA for the past 3 years. Since moving in, she has taken it upon herself to provide what she calls conformist leadership to the community. With her signature blonde hair, immaculately pressed emerald green jacket, and a clipboard that looks like a weapon of authority, Karen patrols our complex like a neighborhood dictator. She truly believes that she has the right to control everything, from the flowers people plant to the times visitors are allowed to park their cars. Little did she know that today's confrontation would reveal a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about power. The whole nightmare started 3 weeks ago when I decided to reorganize my workspace. I'd been cramped in a tiny spare bedroom that barely fit my desk and equipment, so I moved my operation to a larger, sunnier room on the ground floor of my unit. It had better lighting, more space for my multiple monitors, and importantly, it was quieter during my frequent video conferences with clients. Karen appeared at my door the very next morning, clipboard in hand and wearing that green blazer like a uniform. "David, I need to inspect your commercial business license," she announced, not even bothering with pleasantries. "I can see from the street that you've got serious computer equipment in there, and that constitutes a commercial operation in a residential zone." I explained patiently that this was simply a home office, completely legal under both city zoning laws and our lease agreements. "I'm a software engineer, Karen. This is just where I work from home." But she shook her head with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. "No, I can tell this is more than just working from home. You've got server equipment, multiple monitors, professional lighting. This violates our community standards." When I asked to see the specific HOA regulation I was supposedly violating, Karen's expression turned condescending. "David, I don't think you understand how this works. As HOA president, I have the authority and responsibility to interpret our community guidelines in whatever way best protects our property values and maintains our neighborhood character." She scribbled something on her clipboard with theatrical importance. "To have 72 hours to provide proper documentation or face penalties." A week later, the harassment escalated significantly. I found an official-looking notice taped to my door, printed on letterhead that read, "Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association," complete with what appeared to be a professional seal. The document informed me that I was being fined $200 for unauthorized commercial use of residential property and creating an eyesore that diminishes community aesthetics. The language was formal and intimidating, full of legal-sounding phrases about covenant violations and community standards enforcement. When I knocked on Taryn's door to discuss the fine, she answered wearing her full HOA president persona. "David, I tried to work with you, but you've left me no choice. Your office setup is clearly visible from the street and it sends the wrong message about our community. We have standards here. I have the authority to make determinations about what serves our collective best interests. If you don't like my decision, you can appeal to the HOA board." When I asked who else was on this board, she gave me a patronizing smile. "That's confidential information, David. HOA governance isn't something ordinary residents need to concern themselves with." The third wave of attack focused on character assassination and social isolation. Karen began a whisper campaign that would have impressed a political operative. She sent carefully worded emails to all residents, warning about suspicious commercial activities happening in the complex, and encouraging everyone to remain vigilant and report any unusual behavior that might compromise our community's residential character. The emails were masterfully crafted to sound official and concerning without making specific accusations. "It has come to the attention of the HOA board that certain units may be engaged in activities that violate our residential zoning requirements," one email read. "We cannot discuss specific ongoing investigations. We encourage all residents to be aware of any neighbors who seem to be operating businesses from their homes, especially those involving significant electronic equipment or frequent deliveries." The effect was exactly what Karen intended. Mrs. Johnson from the unit next to mine started asking pointed questions about my computer business. Mr. Peterson, who I'd always had friendly conversations with, began giving me suspicious looks whenever we passed in the hallway. Even the maintenance staff seemed nervous around me, as if they'd been warned that I might be running some kind of illegal operation. The social isolation was subtle but effective. Conversations would stop when I entered the mailroom. People who used to smile and wave now avoided eye contact. I realized Karen had successfully positioned herself as the protector of community values while painting me as some kind of threat to their peaceful way of life. The fourth escalation was the most calculated and devastating yet. Karen organized what she called an emergency community safety meeting in our community center, sending official-looking invitations to every resident. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, deliberately chosen because most people would be home from work and available to attend. I arrived to find the community center packed with nearly every resident in the complex. Karen had set up a full presentation, complete with a projector, professionally printed handouts, and even a small podium that made her look official and authoritative. She was wearing her most formal green blazer and had clearly spent considerable time preparing her materials. "Good evening, neighbors," Karen began with the confidence of a seasoned politician. "I've called this meeting because we face a serious threat to our community's integrity and property values." She clicked her first PowerPoint slide, which displayed a photo of my office window taken from the street. The image was captioned in bold letters, UN. "And you can see," Karen continued, gesturing at the screen with a laser pointer she'd apparently purchased for the occasion, "we have a resident who has converted his apartment into what appears to be a full-scale business operation. Multiple computer monitors, professional equipment, and constant activity that clearly exceeds normal home office use. She had somehow managed to take photos through my window that made my perfectly legal home office look like some kind of suspicious command center." The presentation continued with slides showing property value statistics from other complexes where commercial infiltration had allegedly caused neighborhood decline. Karen had charts and graphs that looked impressively professional, though I noticed she never cited specific sources for any of her data. "When we allow residential units to be used for commercial purposes," she declared, "we risk losing our community character and our property values." She concluded with a dramatic flourish that would have been impressive if it weren't so completely fabricated. "The HOA board has conducted a thorough investigation and determined that this commercial operation poses a significant risk to our community. We are demanding immediate cessation of all business activities, or we will be forced to pursue legal remedies, including potential eviction proceedings." The room was dead silent as she stared directly at me. Some people think they can ignore community standards and do whatever they want, but that's not how responsible neighborhoods work. Several residents asked questions that Karen answered with the smooth confidence of someone who'd never been challenged on facts. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked about the specific rules being violated, Karen replied that HOA regulations are complex legal documents that require interpretation by qualified board members. When Mr. Garcia inquired about the appeals process, she assured him that all HOA As I sat there listening to this performance, I had to admire Karen's thoroughness. She'd created an entire fictional legal framework, complete with official-sounding procedures and threats that would intimidate most people into compliance. What she didn't realize was that her elaborate charade was about to collide with someone who actually understood the law. The fifth and most aggressive escalation came 72 hours after the community meeting. Karen appeared at my door at exactly 8 a.m., dressed in her most formal business attire and carrying a leather portfolio that screamed official business. With her was a man in an expensive Malta demanded formally, "You have failed to comply with HOA directives regarding unauthorized commercial use of residential property. As president of the Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, I am here to deliver your final notice." She opened her portfolio with theatrical precision and handed me a document that looked like it had been prepared by a law firm. The letterhead read, "Final Notice of Violation and Demand for Compliance," in bold, intimidating fonts. "Do you have 48 hours to completely cease all commercial operations and restore your unit to residential use only?" Karen continued, her voice taking on the tone of a judge delivering a sentence. "Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, including fines of up to $5,000, legal fees, and potential eviction proceedings." The fake lawyer nodded gravely, playing his part in this elaborate. I scanned the document, which was actually quite impressive in its official appearance. It cited various housing codes, zoning regulations, and HOA powers that would sound intimidating to anyone who didn't actually understand property law. "This seems very thorough," I said calmly. Can I ask which law firm prepared this documentation? Karen and her companion exchanged a quick glance that told me everything I needed to know. That's confidential legal information, Karen replied. What matters is that you understand the seriousness of this situation. The HOA has been more than patient with your violations, but our responsibility is to protect the interests of all residents, not to accommodate one person who thinks rules don't apply to him. As they turned to leave, Karen delivered her final threat with obvious satisfaction. David, I want you to understand something clearly. I've been managing communities for years, and I know exactly how to handle residents who think they can do whatever they want. You can choose to comply voluntarily, or you can learn the hard way that HOA authority is real and enforceable. Either way, this commercial operation is ending. What Karen didn't realize was that during these 3 weeks of escalating harassment, I hadn't just been passively enduring her attacks. Every evening after she thought she'd scored another victory in her campaign of intimidation, I'd been conducting my own investigation. With my legal background and technical skills, I'd been researching property records, HOA regulations, corporate filings, and most importantly, discovering facts about our community that would completely destroy Karen's entire house of cards. The irony was perfect. While Karen was congratulating herself on her thorough legal strategy, she had no idea that she was about to face someone who actually understood the law better than her fake legal counsel ever could. Monday morning arrived with Karen's masterpiece of overconfidence, calling 911 to report that I was illegally occupying community property in violation of HOA authority. I watched from my window as she stood on the sidewalk, gesturing dramatically at my office while explaining to 3 police officers how she was heroically protecting community interests from a dangerous rule breaker. Officer Thompson knocked on my door at exactly 9:15 a.m. He was a middle-aged veteran with the kind of patient, professional demeanor that comes from years of dealing with neighborhood disputes. Good morning, sir. I'm Officer Thompson. We received a complaint about unauthorized use of community property. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Of course, officer. Please come in. I gestured him into my living room, where I'd prepared a carefully organized presentation of documents. I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about the situation here. Thompson sat down and opened his notebook, clearly expecting this to be a routine housing violation that would be resolved with a simple warning or citation. Ms. Mitchell claims you're operating a commercial business in violation of HOA regulations, Thompson began. She says you've been warned multiple times and have refused to comply with community standards. I nodded thoughtfully. Officer Thompson, before we discuss HOA regulations, I'd like to show you something that might change the entire context of this complaint. I handed him a certified copy of my property deed, notarized and bearing the official seal of the county recorder's office. This document shows that I am the sole owner of the entire Maplewood Gardens complex, including all 47 residential units and every common area facility. Thompson's eyebrows shot up as he examined the paperwork. You own this whole place? He asked, clearly surprised by this development. That's correct. I purchased the entire complex from Sunrise Construction Company in August of 2019 as a single investment property. Every person living here, including Karen Mitchell, is my tenant. I collect rent from each unit individually, but legally I'm the sole property owner. I could see Thompson processing this information and beginning to understand the implications. To when Miss Mitchell talks about HOA authority, Thompson said slowly, she's claiming to have power over property that you actually own. Exactly. And that's just the beginning of what she's been doing. I opened my laptop and pulled up a detailed financial spreadsheet. Over the past 2 years, Karen has been collecting money from tenants under the pretense of HOA fees, despite having no legal authority to do so. The revelation of my legal background was the moment that changed everything. Officer Thompson, there's something else you should know about my background. Before I became a software engineer, I earned my Juris Doctor from State University and worked for 3 years as a compliance officer for Metropolitan Investment Group. I specialize in real estate law and corporate governance. What Corinne has been doing isn't just harassment, it's potentially criminal fraud. Thompson sat back in his chair, clearly realizing this was much more complex than a simple housing dispute. Why didn't you mention your ownership and legal background earlier? He asked. I smiled slightly. I wanted to see exactly how far Karen would take this fraud. I needed comprehensive evidence of her pattern of deception before taking action. Her call to 911 today was actually perfect timing. At that moment, Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 3B knocked urgently on my door. David, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I saw the police cars and I can't stay quiet anymore. She looked at Officer Thompson with obvious relief. Officer Karen Mitchell has been terrorizing residents in this complex for months. She told us that anyone who didn't follow her rules would be evicted immediately, and we were all afraid of losing our homes. Mrs. Rodriguez continued with growing confidence as she realized she finally had someone in authority who would listen. Karen created all these crazy rules that seemed designed just to make our lives miserable. No children playing in common areas after 6 p.m., $25 fines for leaving shoes outside our doors, $50 cleaning fees every time someone used the barbecue area. She said these were all legitimate HOA powers, but if David owns the whole property, then she's been lying to us about everything. Officer Thompson asked for more details about Karen's financial activities, and I was ready with comprehensive documentation. I've been tracking every transaction meticulously, I explained, opening a detailed accounting spreadsheet. Karen has collected a total of $47,000 from tenants over the past 24 months, claiming these were mandatory HOA fees. Every penny has been deposited into her personal Wells Fargo account. I showed Thompson the bank records I'd obtained through legal public information request. What makes this particularly egregious is that Karen has been paying herself $1,500 monthly as HOA president compensation from money she collected fraudulently. She's essentially created an elaborate scheme to collect rent payments that she has no right to receive. And it gets much worse, I continued, opening another folder of evidence. Karen has been signing maintenance contracts under the fake HOA name, but she's been deliberately overpaying vendors and pocketing the difference. For example, she hired her brother's landscaping company, Mitchell Brothers Lawn Care, for $800 monthly, when the market rate for our property is only $300. The $500 monthly overpayment has been split between Karen and her brother. Thompson was taking detailed notes as I walked through each fraudulent transaction. She's done similar markup schemes with cleaning services, pest control, and even snow removal. In every case, she's chosen vendors who would participate in her kickback scheme, rather than legitimate companies that would do the work at fair market rates. I pulled out copies of contracts that Karen had signed using forged HOA letterhead. What's particularly sophisticated about her fraud is that she created an entire fictional corporate structure. She filed fake articles of incorporation for the Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, created official-looking documents and letterhead, and even established a business checking account using the fraudulent corporate identity. The legal implications are severe, I explained to Thompson. Under state law, this constitutes theft by deception, mail fraud if she used postal services for any of her fake HOA communications, and potentially racketeering if we can prove she intended this as an ongoing criminal enterprise. Thompson nodded gravely. What evidence do you have of her intent to defraud? I opened my laptop to a folder containing dozens of saved emails and documents. Karen has been very careful to create paper trails that make her fraud look legitimate. She sent official-looking notices, maintained detailed financial records, and even held fake board meetings to create the appearance of proper corporate governance. The sophistication of her deception actually works against her legally, because it proves. At this point, Mr. Peterson knocked on my door. David, I apologize for interrupting, but I overheard Mrs. Rodriguez talking about HOA fees, and I think you need to know what Karen told me last month. Thompson gestured for him to continue. Karen came to my apartment with a bill for $300, claiming the HOA board had voted to assess each unit for emergency roof repairs, Peterson explained. When I asked to see the board meeting minutes, she told me that HOA governance was confidential and that residents weren't entitled to see internal documents. She said if I didn't pay within 10 days, I would face eviction proceedings. Dr. Thompson looked at me with obvious concern. How many residents has she been targeting with these fake assessments? I consulted my research notes. Based on my investigation, Karen has been systematically extracting money from at least 38 of the 47 units. She's been particularly aggressive with elderly residents and single mothers, probably because she assumed they would be less likely to challenge her authority. The scope of Karen's fraud was becoming clear to Officer Thompson, and I could see him realizing this was a major criminal case rather than a simple civil dispute. Mr. Thompson, what's your plan for addressing this situation? He asked. I looked out my window at Karen, who was still standing on the sidewalk with complete confidence, obviously expecting Thompson to emerge with me in handcuffs. I'm calling an emergency community meeting for tonight, I said. It's time everyone learned the truth about who really owns this property and what Karen has been doing to all of us. But before I faced Karen in front of the entire community, I had one more crucial phone call to make that would eliminate any possibility of her talking her way out of the consequences. 7 o'clock that evening, the community center was packed beyond its normal capacity. Word about the morning's police visit had spread through the complex like wildfire, and it seemed like every single resident had shown up to see what would happen. Karen sat in the front row, wearing her most formal emerald green blazer, flanked by the same man who had posed as her legal counsel during her ultimatum visit. Her expression radiated confidence, as if she expected this meeting to be her final triumph over the troublemaker who had dared to challenge her authority. I stepped up to the podium carrying my laptop, a box of documents, and a small digital projector I'd borrowed from my office equipment. "Good evening, neighbors. I know there's been a lot of confusion and concern about recent events, so I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what's been happening in our community." The room was completely silent, with all eyes focused on me. Before I begin my presentation, I want to give Karen the opportunity to explain her actions this morning when she called the police to report that I was illegally occupying community property. Karen stood up with theatrical confidence, clearly relishing what she thought would be her moment of vindication. "David Thompson has been flagrantly violating community regulations for weeks," Karen announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been successfully challenged. "As president of the Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, I have the legal responsibility to protect our community's interests and property values. When someone refuses to follow reasonable rules that apply to everyone else, the HOA has no choice but to enforce compliance through appropriate legal channels." She gestured toward her companion. "Our legal counsel advised that we had exhausted all reasonable alternatives and that police intervention was necessary to protect the community from further violations." The fake lawyer nodded solemnly, maintaining his role in Karen's elaborate charade. "Thank you for that explanation, Karen. Now I'd like everyone to see something that might change their perspective on this situation." I connected my laptop to the projector and displayed my property deed on the large screen at the front of the room. The document was clear and official, bearing multiple notarized seals and the signature of the county recorder. Is the warranty deed showing that I am the sole owner of the entire Maplewood Gardens complex, including all 47 residential units, the community center where we're sitting right now, the parking areas, the landscaping, and every other facility on this property. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the audience as people began to understand the implications. I purchased this entire complex from Sunrise Construction Company on August 15, 2019, as a single investment property. Every person in this room, including Karen Mitchell, is my tenant. You pay rent to live here, but you do not own individual units. The murmurs grew louder as residents processed this information. Karen's face had gone noticeably pale, but she stood up again with desperation masquerading as confidence. "That can't be right. We all signed purchase agreements. We're homeowners, not renters." I nodded sympathetically. "I understand the confusion, Karen, but what you signed were lease agreements, not purchase contracts. Sunrise Construction may have used misleading language, but legally, you've all been tenants from day one." And let's discuss what this means for Karen's claims about HOA authority, I continued, clicking to my next slide. Under state law, a homeowners association can only exist when there are multiple property owners who agree to shared governance. Since I'm the sole owner, there cannot legally be an HOA for this property. The room was completely silent as people began to grasp the full scope of Karen's deception. Karen hasn't just been claiming fake authority. She's been using that fake authority to steal money from all of you. I displayed my financial analysis spreadsheet, showing months of careful documentation. Over the past 24 months, Karen has collected $47,000 from residents under the pretense of HOA fees. This money has been deposited directly into her personal Wells Fargo checking account, not into any legitimate community fund. Mrs. Rodriguez continued with growing confidence as she realized she finally had someone in authority who would listen. Karen created all these crazy rules that seemed designed just to make our lives miserable. No children playing in common areas after 6 p.m., $25 fines for leaving shoes outside our doors, $50 cleaning fees every time someone used the barbecue area. She said these were all legitimate HOA powers, but if David owns the whole property, then she's been lying to us about everything. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. People started talking all at once, voices rising as they realized how extensively they'd been deceived. Mr. Garcia stood up and pointed at Karen. "You told us we'd be evicted if we didn't pay those fees. You made us afraid to question anything." Karen remained seated, her face now completely drained of color. "Let me show you the extent of Karen's financial fraud," I continued, clicking through additional slides. She's been signing maintenance contracts using fake HOA letterhead, but deliberately choosing vendors who would participate in kickback schemes. Her brother's landscaping company, for example, has been paid $800 monthly for work that should cost $300. The difference has been split between Karen and her brother. I displayed copies of the fraudulent contracts, each bearing Karen's signature and the fake HOA seal she created. She's done similar markups with cleaning services, pest control, and snow removal. In every case, she's prioritized personal profit over community needs. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. Karen, you told my elderly mother that she'd lose her apartment if she didn't pay a special assessment for roof repairs. My mother was so scared she skipped meals to save money for your fake fee. The room erupted in angry voices as other residents began sharing their own stories of Karen's intimidation tactics. Mr. Peterson, the retired accountant, stood up with obvious fury. Karen came to me with a $300 emergency assessment, claiming the HOA board had voted on it. When I asked to see meeting minutes, you told me HOA governance was confidential. You were just making everything up. As the anger in the room reached a fever pitch, I raised my hand for silence. There's one more thing you all need to hear. I have someone on the phone who can confirm everything I've told you tonight. I activated the speakerphone on my cell phone, and a clear voice filled the room. Good evening, everyone. This is Richard Caldwell, former CEO of Sunrise Construction Company. I've been briefed on tonight's situation, and I want to set the record straight about several important facts. The room fell completely silent as everyone strained to hear every word. First, Sunrise Construction never authorized anyone to establish a homeowners association for Maplewood Gardens. Mr. Thompson purchased the entire complex as a single investment property, which precludes the formation of an HOA under state law. Caldwell's voice was clear and authoritative, carrying the weight of someone who had dealt with these legal issues professionally. Second, Ms. Mitchell contacted our company repeatedly over the past 2 years, asking about HOA formation and claiming she had been given authority to manage the property. We told her explicitly in multiple phone calls and written communications that she had no such authority and that any attempt to collect fees or enforce rules would be illegal. Karen finally stood up, her voice shaking with desperation. That's not true. You told me I could form an HOA. You said it was normal for communities to have resident management. Caldwell's response was immediate and devastating. Ms. Mitchell, I have copies of every communication between our companies. We never gave you permission to do anything except pay your rent and follow your lease agreement like every other tenant. The room erupted as residents turned to stare at Karen with a mixture of rage and disgust. She looked around desperately, searching for even one sympathetic face among the crowd, but found only anger and betrayal. Officer Thompson, who had been standing quietly in the back throughout the meeting, stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, based on the evidence presented tonight and my investigation this morning, I need you to understand that you're facing serious criminal charges. The district attorney's office will be contacting you within 48 hours regarding fraud, embezzlement, and theft by deception. Karen's fake lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear and began quickly packing his briefcase. It was obvious he wanted to distance himself from this situation as rapidly as possible. I want everyone to know that all the money Karen collected illegally will be refunded, I announced to the room. Every fake fee, every fraudulent assessment, every penny stole will be returned to you with interest. And there will be no more fake HOA rules, no more intimidation, and no more arbitrary fines. Karen stood up one final time, her voice breaking with desperation. You can't do this to me. I was trying to help this community. I was making it better. But her words fell on deaf ears. Every person in that room had been victimized by her lies, and there was no sympathy left for the woman who had terrorized them for so long. She grabbed her purse and rushed toward the exit, her fake lawyer following close behind. The moment the door closed behind them, the entire room erupted in thunderous applause and cheering that lasted for several minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up with tears streaming down her face. David, we owe you such an apology. We should have trusted you instead of believing Karen's lies. How can we make this right? I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. We make it right by building a real community together, one based on honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. This was just the beginning of our transformation. The hard work of rebuilding trust and creating genuine community spirit was still ahead of us. 2 weeks after our dramatic community meeting, the legal consequences for Karen Mitchell began unfolding exactly as I had predicted. The district attorney's office filed formal charges, including fraud in the first degree, theft by deception, and operating an illegal business enterprise. During their investigation, prosecutors discovered that Karen had pulled an identical scheme at her previous residence in Portland, Oregon, where she had collected over $30,000 in fake HOA fees before residents discovered her fraud and she fled town. Rather than face a jury trial that would have certainly resulted in serious prison time, Karen accepted a plea bargain. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service specifically focused on elder care, and was ordered to pay full restitution of $47,000 plus interest. Additionally, she was required to move out of the complex within 30 days and was banned from ever serving in any community management role. The transformation in our community atmosphere was immediate and remarkable. Without Karen's oppressive presence and constant surveillance, residents began interacting freely for the first time in years. People who had been afraid to socialize or organize activities suddenly felt comfortable expressing themselves and building genuine relationships with their neighbors. I organized a series of weekly community meetings to establish transparent communication channels and democratic decision-making processes. Instead of Karen's fake HOA, we created a tenant advisory council with elected representatives from each building. The council meets monthly to discuss maintenance issues, plan community events, and suggest improvements that would benefit everyone who lives here. Mrs. Rodriguez was unanimously elected as our first council president, and she proved to be everything Karen wasn't: honest, collaborative, and genuinely committed to serving residents rather than exploiting them. David showed us that real leadership means transparency and accountability, she said during our first official meeting. We're going to make sure no one ever has the opportunity to abuse power in this community again. With the money recovered from Karen's fraud and the elimination of her kickback schemes, I was able to invest significantly in genuine property improvements that residents had been requesting for years. The landscaping contract went to a reputable local company at fair market rates, saving over $500 monthly that could be redirected toward actual community benefits. Our playground area received a complete overhaul with modern, safe equipment that children actually wanted to use. The community center was renovated with comfortable new furniture, updated lighting, and a small kitchen facility so residents could host family celebrations and social events without paying Karen's arbitrary fees. I also installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering all common areas, not to spy on residents as Karen had threatened, but to ensure everyone's safety and provide evidence if any actual crimes occurred on the property. Mr. Peterson, with his professional accounting background, volunteered to manage our community finances with complete transparency. Every month, he publishes detailed reports showing exactly how maintenance fees are being spent, what improvements are planned, and how budget decisions are made. This is how financial management should work in any community, he explained to residents. Open books, detailed records, and no hidden agendas or conflicts of interest. Mrs. Johnson, who had initially been suspicious of me due to Karen's manipulation, became one of my strongest advocates for transparent property management. I'm embarrassed that I believed Karen's lies about David, she admitted during a community gathering. She convinced us to be afraid of each other instead of working together. Now we have a landlord who actually listens to our concerns and responds to our needs. Without Karen's ridiculous restrictions and arbitrary rules, genuine community spirit began flourishing in ways we had never experienced. Mr. Garcia organized monthly barbecue parties in our courtyard that brought families together across cultural and generational lines. Mrs. Lee started offering morning Tai Chi classes in our garden area, which attracted participants ranging from young parents to elderly residents looking for gentle exercise. Families could finally use the clubhouse freely for birthday parties, holiday celebrations, and social gatherings without needing Karen's permission or paying her excessive fees. Children were allowed to play in common areas without arbitrary time restrictions, and parents could actually relax instead of constantly worrying about receiving violation notices. I established a community improvement fund using a portion of the rental income, where residents can submit proposals for enhancements and the council votes democratically on priorities. The first approved project was a community garden where residents can grow vegetables and flowers together, creating both practical benefits and opportunities for neighbors to work collaboratively. Many residents approached me individually to express gratitude and apologize for initially believing Karen's lies about me. David, you showed us that having authority doesn't mean you have to abuse it, Mrs. Thompson told me during one of our community events. You could have retaliated against us for not supporting you, but instead you've made life better for everyone here. The positive changes extended beyond our complex as well. Local newspapers covered our story with headlines like, "Software Engineer Exposes Massive HOA Fraud," and "Residents Discover Landlord Who Actually Cares." I received calls from property owners in other communities asking for advice about similar situations, and I was happy to share what I had learned about identifying and addressing fraudulent community management. To commemorate our community's transformation, we created a memorial garden where Karen used to park, complete with a fountain and a brass plaque reading, "Maplewood Gardens Community, built on trust, transparency, and mutual respect." Next to it, I converted a storage room into a community learning center, offering free Wi-Fi and educational resources. Mrs. Lee, a retired teacher, helps kids with homework and teaches seniors computer skills. Every year on the anniversary of Karen's exposure, we celebrate Transparency Day by reviewing finances and engaging in discussions about community improvement, fostering a culture of collaboration and openness. Sitting in my home office today, I reflect on how Karen Mitchell's attempts to control our community through fraud and intimidation backfired. Her actions taught us valuable lessons about power, accountability, and standing up for what's right. Karen relied on fear, but she didn't expect someone to expose her. Through careful documentation, we revealed her fraud. Now, our community thrives with mutual respect and cooperation, free from arbitrary fines. Ironically, Karen's downfall, triggered by her own 911 call, sparked the positive change that transformed our neighborhood.